Thanks, Zoom.
Is the audio working, Tina and Helen? Oh, probably no. Helen didn't probably work out.
Yeah, it's working. I was finishing the reading last night, so I'm quite exhausted, but I'm here.
Okay, that's okay. I just want to make sure the internet is okay.
Glad you're here, Tina.
Thank you, Francisco. Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation.
So how, like, what do you find, like, what stand out for you in the reading?
So in the summertime, I took How People Learn, and we had a module on motivation, but this reading really did a deep dive into the many ways that people are motivated. And I'm particularly interested in the cultural piece. And I think being first gen, there's no I when you're coming from certain cultures. My culture is very collectivistic. So I didn't realize that a lot of my motivations were integrated from Lee and my culture, and they weren't intrinsic from myself. And so having that realization was important, even if it is integrated, it will play the same role as if it is intrinsic. But it was just interesting to see how culture plays a huge part, and how people define their values, which in essence will gauge their motivation.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my internet was so unstable, so I was bounced off from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully,
Okay.
So I'm connecting now via my cell phone. So hopefully I can stay here longer.
I just want to let you know that I record the Zoom session, so we can use the audio in place of the reflection if you want. Just like Slack me, and I can, if you want to do that, I can send you the audio and in the chat if you want to do that. And
Thank you.
Tina was talking about the reading on motivation, like the self-determination.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking about the first one, self-determination theory and the facilitation of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah, the main part. I mean, that was
Right.
the part that excited me the most, because of the personal connection to my culture and how that's shaped my motivation.
I have the same kind of feeling that, like Tina, that I feel a lot of my goals are actually integrated or like identified. And I feel it's very helpful to realize like what are the influence that shape my goals and my values. Because before I really like that the author describes the different degrees of extrinsic motivation, because before that I always hear about like the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, but actually I feel like the continuum he described really make you have a clear idea about like where are your goals coming from, and sometimes like if you have like identified or integrated motivation, some people may wrongly think that that's like intrinsic motivation because you are willing to spend efforts on things, but actually it may still be different from the intrinsic motivation. And I think it's very helpful to have like a continuum that describes the different degrees of internalization, instead of just have a pure like distinct intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't know how you guys did it last week. Are we just doing a summary of all the reading, or just having an open dialogue about what resonated with us? I don't
just
know.
Just like open dialogue, like whatever you find interesting, or like some parts you didn't understand. Like there's like we're not doing like a summary just because I find it more helpful. Like we just talk about things that interest us.
Okay. All right, no problem.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so a question has been staying with me for a long time is regarding the reward. I mean, here it talks about intrinsic rewards can actually undermine intrinsic motivation, right? So I was wondering if it's advisable for like teachers and parents to use reward to motivate their children or students. How do you guys think?
That's a wonderful question. I think it's a very important question, and if I had the answers, I would take my show on the road, and I'd be on all the TED Talk stages. But I think maybe advising advising parents, maybe having some type of a parent night, parent university where we're teaching them about how to set rewards and or set goals and like incremental rewards along the way. So it's not always just, extrinsic and intrinsic, but it's just very difficult because our education system is predominantly extrinsic. We have the ACE, not so much right now because of the COVID, but it's, the standardized tests. It's about percentages.
Exactly.
So the intrinsic motivation, is it's eclipsed by the extrinsic the motivation. So, but in the reading, I think it was really cool how you can actually have a little bit of both, and it's to be successful to use a little bit of both. But it's finding that balance, and I think that's the difficult part. So maybe I think modeling it for parents, what extrinsic versus intrinsic looks like. I don't know. That's some of the ideas that I have.
So I would jump and say, or add to that, I think the whole purpose of understanding intrinsic or extrinsic motivation is really individualized. So the reason why rewards aren't always effective is because it's based on what the child or the student finds salience in. So if a child some child might want a reward of grades, and the other one might want more free time at recess. And so if the reward is always a grade and not more time at recess, the child's not going to be motivated to begin to partake in whatever the thing is to get him the reward. And so if the reward doesn't match the child's initial or innate or intrinsic motivation, then they're not going to be engage in whatever the activity is. And I think that was what the reading was trying to say, is that rewards aren't good if they're not based on what's salient to the child. Like some people want love, some people want money, and that's why they get married, right? And so, or I mean, I'm generalizing here, people, sorry. But if the reward is just money and not love, the person might not want to get married. And so it's all about what the person finds important to who they are and what motivates them. So I think to add to Francisco's part is teachers have to, I guess, know their students and knows what motivates them, and parents as well. And as a parent, that's something I definitely, like, I won't just say, oh, you're in timeout. I'm going to say, I'm going to take away this and this, because the consequences I know will be more salient to what he really doesn't want anymore. So then the behavior will change, as opposed to say, oh, you're just going to, be in your room for another hour. That's not going to work because he doesn't, or it doesn't resonate with him or what motivates him. So yeah, sorry, I won't talk anymore, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I just found in the reading, which says that all expected tangible rewards made contingent on task performance do reliably undermine intrinsic motivation. So I was thinking, like, in real life, we actually give students and children reward to kind of motivate them. But sometimes I just kept doubting myself. Am I doing wrong, like giving my son some kind of maybe materialistic reward after him like hit a goal? Would that be actually diminishing his intrinsic motivation in the long run?
I was reading for my making hearing common class earlier this week, and there was this article on like how there's a trend in parenting today of like wanting your kids to be happy and confident, and how that translates into like a saturation of praise, like for everything. And like that, I felt like that really kind of tied in with the reading today, and just how like all this extrinsic reward like really isn't creating this sense of intrinsic motivation for our kids, like especially when, as Tina was saying, when the extrinsic reward is like just kind of empty praise, or even just like material like rewards, instead of like spending time with your child, like I'm so proud of you, let's do this together, or I'm so proud of you, like I'm giving affection and love. And even our professor was sharing how like he found himself doing that when he was raising his own kids, how like we had caught up being busy that like praise for our kids ends up being this like an increase in allowance or a material reward, instead of like, let me give you part of myself, let me give you part of my time, part of my love. And like, and then this article too, like the emphasis on relatedness, like some of our kids, like I see improvements in their intrinsic motivation and just their desire to be in school when I allow them to be in my classroom during my lunch period, which might be my only second to pee that day, but like then getting that like time to create that like relationship ends up being the impetus more so than like throwing out Jolly Ranchers, and for some kids that is what they need like that. But I don't know, I think what Tina was saying on individualizing the rewards and really catering them to the student's interests was really important.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Those ideas, Tina and Rebecca, and the questions are really wonderful, Helen. Going back to the structure, like the education system that we operate is a token, is basically like a token economy, based on the psychological concept, like Skinnerian, reward and punishment and on all these different reinforcement schedules. And I wish that at the beginning of the year, we could spend like 2 or 3 weeks with the kids and just like learning about them and just be doing all of these exploratory and discovering themselves. And then from there, then it's almost like when you guys were talking about how you like to receive rewards or like to give one, then it got me thinking of the love languages, the
5 languages of love, right?
Yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah, and there's actually one for the workplace where it's
for students.
Yeah, so it's like, I guess it's like words of appreciation. So it's not like the love word, because that can be a little iffy in a school system. But and that's another thing. It's like, why not throw around love? I think we all have love for our students, But anyways, so it's like how do you like to receive your rewards? How do you like to give them? And I think it's important for
but sometimes I do think like in reality it's easier said than done. I mean, honestly, like for most of my students who are adolescents, like high schoolers, they would say, Helen, please like give me more assignment, since if I finish all the assignment, my mom would buy me a new iPad, etc.
Yeah.
I don't think it actually is beneficial for their intrinsic motivation, but like in the short term, it seems does work.
Yeah.
So it's kind of contradictory to what we know to the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, in a perfect world, of course. Yeah, you could, and that's kind of like that short-term gratification, rather than the long-term, you know, success and satisfaction. And you know, it's interesting that you guys are talking about, you know, success and praise. And there was one quote that stood out to me, and that's what I used in my reflection, was the well-meant successes we hand out and the praise for intelligence we lavish on them do not encourage a hearty can-do mentality. So, you know, always praising like, oh wow, look at Jimmy, he's so smart, how smart or how intelligent he's, so, you know, he's the A honor roll. So we and it is well meant, and I think that's why I put it. So it's well meant, but does it really encourage that hardiness, you know, the hardy type personality? You know, I think it's
Yeah,
that it's
totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I was going to say. Like, when we praise a child or student, try to be specific and encourage the growth mindset instead of like, you're so clever, you're so smart, or you did a great job. Some general comments. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
So
in
go ahead.
addition to, sorry, in addition to how you make the praise, I think I remember something that's that really I was impressed when I read the growth mindset book previously, is that she talks about like, if your children is doing a work that's easy and she did very well on it, like she says, like, you shouldn't just like praise your child for like doing a good job on the homework. You need to ask your child, do you find this work challenging? Did you learn anything from the work? And if your child's answer is no, then you shouldn't just give him or her the praise that you did a good job. You should ask him or her that, how can you make this work more challenging? Or like, how can you do some like more challenging work so that you can learn from the things? Because if you are really having a growth mindset, your goal is to improve your abilities. You don't want to just do a task that show that you're smart and you're not learning from it. And I feel like that's really ignored in my like I feel in China when students do a good job, the students parents or teachers never check the students. Do you find this work challenging? Did you learn anything from it? They basically just say, if you did a good job, then I give you the praise. And then it doesn't really foster like a seeking challenge, this kind of like that part. And I think that's also very important for the like the heart, the can-do mindset. So like,
to piggyback it, like, I do believe lots of homework is meaningless. Yeah, like my elder son is attending a public school. He's 4th grader now, and he has a huge amount of homework. Lots of them were just memorizing and reciting homework. I don't think they have much value, but it's kind of reality here. And if you go to the school, you have to obey all the rules. So sometimes I just feel powerless, since myself is a teacher, right? As a teacher and educator, but you cannot like make change on the system level.
I definitely agree. And you know, before I'm currently a college counselor, but I was a teacher the last 7 years, and I taught a class called Theory of Knowledge, and it's all about how you know what you know, and it's a personalized learning journey. And it was really hard. The hardest thing for me was grading. So it's like, how do I grade the ideas of Rebecca versus the ideas of Tina versus Helen, you know? So it was really hard for me. But again, we have these district standards of 1 grade a week. So I think that was the most challenging part. And again, going back to that token economy model, that banking system almost, where, you know, we can try to disrupt some of these forces, but you know, there's just this tsunami of you know, resistance that we encounter. Yeah, and it's even more so with virtual education because of the accountability piece, where it's like, are the kids staying busy in a virtual environment? You know, are the teachers giving enough work? So it's definitely concerning. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry your son is has so much homework, when they should really be focusing on the social emotional health and seeing how they're doing with this new format of school that's never been done before.
Yeah, sometimes it's just difficult to translate or espouse the values and educational research into real practice.
Helen, I was just going to say, are you comfortable asking the school what's their motivation behind all of the homework? Like, because sometimes I think when we think about it from an aerial view, we were all maybe culturally or just societally thought about motivation and school as being rigorous, and if it's not enough homework, then the school is not of quality. I mean, think about this class. I mean, the people in this class that was like, is this really a Harvard class? Because somehow rigor and challenge and actually stress is equated to quality in some ways. Like if it lacks, if it's too fun or too creative, then it's not of quality. And I wonder now, do you think that's where the school is coming from? Is that their motivation, maybe because of other parents? Because I can't imagine parents won't be able to have a voice at the table in regards to mindless homework.
You actually mentioned a very good point, but the situation is kind of complicated because, first of all, we have a large population, so which makes the competition very fierce. The primary school students would have to compete for the best middle school, otherwise they cannot go to the best high school. So the competition just starts even before primary schools. So it's kind of realities that you cannot change. Like there is an effect which is called theater effect, which means like everyone is watching in the theater, but if someone just stands up or even stand on the chair, others would have to stand up too, since they cannot see the play. Yeah. So some parents would send their children to some kind of training school before primary school to learn Chinese first, or some math. For me, I didn't send my son to the preparation school, but I kind of left him behind. As the first week, the teacher just asked me to the school and had a conversation with her like, oh, you didn't send your son in advance to school, like to get them preparation work. He's the only one in the class who didn't get this preparation. Like, so it's kind of crazy, but it's the whole school culture and environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Wow.
I think one possibility is like, so in my middle school, we are also like very competitive, but I think like some teachers who are more like, I would say more flexible, you can argue with them, and then so it's like in my middle school, we have like a homework, like copying like words, like just kind of like the kind of homework that help you memorize and recite words and grammar. And I think my English teacher actually says like, if you can make sure that you know the words like in the like small like class test or in the exam, then you can opt out of the homework. So maybe I think you can.
You were lucky.
I think maybe you can argue with the teacher, like if you can guarantee certain performance in the end, then maybe they would be relatively more flexible about that. Okay.
Nope. All I could do is like, I don't ask my son to do extra work, which is most of his classmates are doing. They are doing extra work in addition to the work given by the school, because they have an extrinsic motivation system, which is to give the students who did extra practice some like drills, some kind of star. If you do a 30-minute practice, the day before, you can give it to the teacher to ask for extra stars. So most of the students are actually doing, I don't think they are quite meaningful, but kind of repeated practices. So that's all I can do. I didn't ask him to do extra one, but if he don't finish the regular ones, yeah, it would be difficult for him to be at the school. It's actually like kind of #1 public school in my local city. I mean, #1 refers to the rate is students can go to like the top middle schools.
Wow. And you know, when I mean that's such a you know, you provided that kind of that metaphor, the analogy of the theater, and it got me thinking of the, you know, like using that same idea. The kids in the front row have a better view than the kids in the back as well. So again, that goes and talks about like the inequities and the perpetuation, you know, that cycle of you know, success, if you will. So again, like you said, one stands up, but if you're in the front row, you don't have to worry about that, you know. So, you know, if you're continuing, you know, you're getting the prep, you're getting the extra work, so you have a better view than those that are in the back that maybe are really trying. Maybe they bought that ticket and you know, they got a scalp ticket, you know, and they're just happy to be part of the show. And so we need to award that. So yeah, that's what I thought. And then it also got me thinking, and something that I did think about a lot when I was reading through this week's selections about planning. And I would love to know, like, how do you all start your planning? So you start from the assessment? Do you start from the objectives? Do you start from the standards? And what are some of the goals that you have when you're planning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the summer HPL course, we actually learned backwards design, right? To design a course based on the learning goals. But I would say like the current situation here, at least in my city, is test oriented. Like they design the course based on the test.
Our district just adopted, you know how the new STAR standard, or the new standards came out in 2017 for our state. So Texas issued a new set of like state standards in 2017. Like we're just now like really adapting them. And we also adopted a new textbook. And with that came like performance assessments for each 6 weeks. So like our school year is divided into 3 6 weeks in the first semester and 3 6 weeks in the second semester. And each 6 weeks has like 3 to 4 performance assessments with it. So like the performance assessment could be like analyze a piece of nonfiction and deliver a group presentation on it. So what I do in regards to Cisco's question is like, if I know that they need to be able to do that, I like backwards plan and create like scaffolded activities so that they're able to do that at the end. But it's just so interesting because those are like 100% performance goals. And as I'm reading the second article about like learning goals, I was so stricken. On page 18, it talks about how students were given a test and asked to use what they had learned to solve these new problems. And basically that's like transference, right? Like we spend all this time throughout the school year teaching them this skill, and we hope they'll be able to transfer it onto the STAR test. And it's a huge issue because they rarely can, right? Like we're like, how do we get them to be able to transfer onto this? But it explicitly state that like students who had learning goals, not performance goals, but learning goals, were able to transfer, like accomplish transference. So it's like our school district is so, well, I think probably most school districts are probably not alone in this, but are so hung up on these performance goals And really the answer to transference is learning goals. Like it's the opposite of what we're doing.
I think that reminds me of like in another course I was taking, like I'm taking right now, like in the first class, the teacher mentions like some like norms, and one thing is like he says is embracing learning over performance, and I feel like that is just like a really important piece that's like missing. So I only taught briefly in a Chinese rural middle school, and I think I get a lot of more flexibility in terms of like what I want to do in the class. But the students are still very hung up in terms of like performance. They're afraid of like showing like bad performance, and it's like they're pretty much like the students with the entity theory of intelligence, that like once they see something that they feel like they cannot do very well, then they kind of like give up. They don't really try to apply the effective strategies we have learned, but they kind of just like guess the answer, or like do something like they're not really applying what we teach to the homework. And I feel like that's a very important piece, that like how to encourage students to focus on improving their knowledge, like really learn the knowledge and improving their skills, rather than they showing us like they're doing well. I'm just like curious.
I think it has something to do with how would teachers respond to the students' behaviors. For example, if the student gives a wrong answer, would the teacher like criticize him or still encourage him? So it kind of makes a difference.
So I'm not a teacher. I don't have that background knowledge, but my son's school stopped using letter grades, and then they just use like I think competence or above. It's 4 stages, and the last stage doesn't say failure. It says still learning, or still needs continuous learning, or something like that. And I thought that was so genius. To be honest, a lot of his teachers are from the ed school, which gives me a lot of, it makes me feel good that they have this knowledge that and this background that we're currently learning or earning. And so when the principal made that announcement, I was like, what? I need to know if my son's failing or not. Like, I became that parent. But then I realized articulating it that way allows students to have a growth mindset, because they realize that is not all about, because failure is not seen as room to grow. It's seen as incapability, as opposed to still learning or still needs room to learn. I think it's plays something like that. Forgive me. Thank God my son doesn't have that. So I don't know the exact lingo, but it basically infers that there's still growth or still room to grow. And I think just the language itself changes the conversation about what failure means. And I think it's just it doesn't relate to the actual assessment part. But in terms of the grading, I think it for some parents, they know what it means, but I think for the child growing up, it will develop a growth mindset over time.
Yeah, that's really great. And actually, I hate using the F word in school. not that F word, but the failure. Like anytime I talk to a parent or talk to a kid, it's like it's never about failure. It's about like missed opportunities or certain things that you need to work on. So, and I think it's important. And it was a game changer for me when I stopped giving percentages. And I just used the rubric for my for the IB. So I taught IB, and I still am in an IB school. And a lot of IB schools, they grade or they provide holistic feedback instead of grades. So like, let's say on a big, and even the name of it, performance task, it's like on a big task, they'll have strengths of what they did well and then areas of growth. So there's not a grade attached to it. So, and then you have these individual conversations with the kids. And so that's what I would do with essays and any major projects is I would have one-on-one meetings with them and be like, hey, I really like what you did here. Hey, maybe this is what we need to work on for next time. And give them some action items. And then the next time be like, hey, like, look, you were actually able to grow from this. So good job.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a book which is called Troublemakers, written by an alumni at the school. So in the book, Carla Shalaby points out that it's actually not troublemakers who are to blame. If you examine really closely their growing environment, be it school or family, there might be something that parents or teachers can do more instead of just blaming on the kids. So it's quite inspirational to me.
Yeah, that's huge. And then I'll stop talking. When a kid is acting up in class, more than likely, not more than likely, I'm so sorry for saying that. So if a kid is acting up in class, I don't automatically chastise them. That's not the way to approach it. You go up to them and be like, hey, what's going on? Like, are you okay? Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe they just came from a class where they were taunted or bullied. So like if they're acting up, oh, cool.
This one.
It's awesome.
I really like the metaphor, like how she make the troublemakers with birds in the cages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like there's always something that's not necessarily in our locus of control. So it's like I always ask, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Because a lot of behaviors, there's some type of underlying issue rather than just being straight up, causing trouble. It's a lot of times it is something else. And then I'll say one more quote, and then I'm done. So we're talking about like tasks and learning goals, and there was one quote from Dweck where it said, "The master-oriented response is one that allows persistence, but it does force anyone to persist when a rational analysis suggested doing otherwise." So it's like master-oriented responses, learning goals are great, but it has to be rational and it has to make sense. It has to be realistic and something that I'm going to approach to my work. And I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's so important when we think about the zone of proximity. Like the learning goals has to be within the student zone of proximity. And if not, then you're setting the student up to be less motivated if they can't reach it, if it's not really tangible within their ability. So I think sorry, I live on a main street. If you do hear any noise, sorry, I apologize in advance. But I think that's super important. It could be challenging, right? But it still should be what the student's ideally capable of. And when it's just a blanket goal, you can get students along the way, either because it's a less challenging one or one that's outside their ability.
Something I read about a couple years ago that I started doing in my classroom, came from No More Fake Reading. And so students get to pick out like independent reading books. And then instead of and then they would read every day, like for, 10 minutes in class. And then instead of like them having to finish at a certain point or whatever, or me quizzing them on the book at the end, I would do like book conferences with them, and I'd check their bookmark to see what page they were currently on. So let's say they were on page 187. I'd turn to page 184, and I'd read them a paragraph, and I'd be like, tell me about this paragraph. Like, how does this connect with the rest of the book? And they'd chat with me about it. And I'm sharing that because I recently had a girl come to me who's not only in my English class, but also in a reading class, because she has struggled on the STAR test for so many years. And so they're trying to give her a little bit extra reading support. And so we just finished our first 6 weeks, which was really just 5 weeks actually. But she had to read like an entire 350-page novel, and she didn't finish it. She only got like 70 pages in, and she's also an English language learner. And I'm just thinking about what Tina was sharing about like zone of proximal development, like how discouraging that is for her to be like, you have to finish this 300-page book in 5 weeks when, you know, you already, you know, when English is your second language. And then how like we can, the author of No More Fake Reading, and I can't remember their name right now, but like there's ways to assess, you know, students' reading and their reading skills without imposing these really like inaccessible goals on them, you know, with saying like you can read at your own pace and you can choose your own book, you know. And I think there are ways to do it without like making things totally, like Siska was saying, totally inaccessible to them, like totally reasonable, you know.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The idea of CPD or like scaffolding was also quite useful to me, as I used to emphasize too much on students' independence, on my son's independence. I would just throw a book to him and expecting that he will just pick up interest in reading the book in English. English is also his second language. So after learning the CPD and scaffolding parts in the summer, I started to read together with him. And instead of focusing on the grammar or vocabulary parts, we talked about things that he's really interested in, like dinosaurs, like why would there be some animals different in Australia? Those are questions that can really pique his interest in reading, instead of just giving him like, you have to memorize all the words. I think that's kind of dominant way of teaching here in China. Kids are memorizing the vocabulary books and writing down all the grammatical points. So I don't deny that they are just useless, but sometimes finding the interest, I would say that's more kind of, I see my son's eyes were literally glittering, glowing, like, oh, you're talking about something that I'm really interested in. Yeah. So they are actually taking the ride with me.
Yeah. I wanted to add to Rebecca's story about the learner in the book. So my son has delays in reading, and I felt like that what was happening with his school. The teachers were just giving him a large amount of reading. And even though I know that he's capable of reading it and it might take him a little bit, I brought up at the school meeting, like, just imagine how discouraging it is when you know your starting point and the expectation seems so overwhelming that even if you have the ability to, you're discouraged or demotivated because it's not done in a way that caters to your needs or what you need. And so for a minute, I mean, I'll pause my story just to talk about, even for this class, that professor put the audio for the reading. Like, I've never seen that in any other, I mean, before this course, I've took 3 other Harvard courses, and most instructors don't do that. So she probably is giving room to people who might feel overwhelmed by 4 chapters. And how can we make that, if they could do it for students, graduate students at Harvard, why isn't that something that's offered to students? And I think that's the part of understanding that feeling the lack of motivation isn't a lack of capability, but sometimes for a student it could feel that way if it's too overwhelming. And for a student who is English as their second language and they have to read a 300-page novel, is the question isn't about the competence part, but it's more about maybe I don't know if it relates to the autonomy or maybe even the relatedness. Like, I'm a person who English is not my first language. How can I relate to this book with all these other things? So I think it does tap into their self-determination when it feels so daunting, and providing options of an audio, or, you know, breaking the book up in different sections that it feels like, you know, she's chewing on little parts as opposed to trying to eat the whole pie at once, is ways that educators can facilitate students with different learning styles, or different learning delays. In my case, for my son, his teachers do offer audio, and I had to like push for that. Like, okay, I know he could do it, but he needs some assistance. And because, like I said, his teacher was an alum of the ed school, she was open to it. She's like, okay, let's see if I could find. And then now he's a stronger reader, and not because, I think because skill wise, but because he's now motivated to read more, to sharpen that muscle. And before he just wasn't, because it just felt so daunting. And sometimes I think we have to realize, like, if we know that the skill set is not what's that question, but if the student is not taking the first step, realizing that once they take the first step and they find that they could do it, the learning will then speed up. I can't find the right word, but it would speed up because they found the motivation, and they found that it's actually something they can do. I hope that makes sense. I know I was all over the place, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that resonated for sure.
Yeah, just that, I guess that delayed reader, like just that, like, yeah, like for him, and I'm so sorry that they have these titles, you know, delayed reader, like, you know, that's so unfortunate. And yeah, like the audiobooks is really cool. And I sent you guys an article. There's a study that says, you know, audiobooks and reading, it's the same thing to your brain. So it processes it in the certain areas, like your Broca's area, Wernicke's area inside your brain. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's definitely a viable option for our kids, and offering, you know, a multiplicity of different mediums, you know, to show not necessarily comprehension, but just like the enjoyment, you know, like
exactly.
If instead of doing an essay, do a dance, or instead of, you know, or do a poem, or do a song, or, you know, like a little Flipgrid video of what you thought about the reading, rather than just forcing the, you know, all the kids to do a very archaic method of you know,
regurgitation.
Exactly. But you know, it's interesting because on the audiobook, and I think it's so cool, but for some reason I get so distracted with the audiobook, and like I would love to just put it on and just concentrate on it, but like I can't do it for some reason, and so like my mind goes off in these other spaces, and I have to rewind. So I'm like, man, this is counterproductive for me. I need to just start reading. So maybe I just need
the opposite. I have to, like, when I start to read it, like especially with this our last reading was 4 chapters. I found myself every sentence I was internalizing everything. Is that me? Is that my son? Was like, so the audio kept me focused.
Wow.
Like, because it was slowing me down, not because I couldn't read it, but because I was processing it so deeply that I wasn't getting through the video. I'm like, what is going on? So I have the audio in the background to say, come on, Tina, let's go. Come on, stop stopping. Let's go. Or I would be here forever processing every sentence. And so even though, I mean, some people, I give it to people who could sit and read that without stopping and allowing it. Like for me, I'm digesting every sentence, and I so appreciate Karen for allowing that audio just to keep me going, just to keep, you know, just to keep me on pace and say, okay, I could process this later in a group reading with wonderful genius students. And that's what this is for me, because I will process every sentence if I just read it, and it'll take me forever.
That's awesome. And I think that speaks to, you know, Brennan's ability to you know, have these different, I guess, mediums. I think that's wonderful. And Tina, maybe I need to find a space here in my house, or find a space where I can really like, not necessarily devour, but like get into the audio and not have any distractions, because I think that was my issue, just getting distracted and think about like, oh my gosh, did I do this last week? Or what are we gonna have for dinner? So it's like
Yeah, Francisco, I just had a very similar experience as yours. I mean, I was wondering, maybe it's because I'm old-fashioned. I prefer just to read and print it out and highlight and taking notes on the readings instead. I do listening, but mostly I listen to like podcasts or songs, something more casual. So I would say I'm more maybe old-fashioned or visionary learner instead of auditory learner.
Yeah, I'm definitely an auditory learner.
Yeah, that's also awesome. I mean, having access to all the media would be make it more accessible to all the learners.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious to know, like Tina, for your son's school, is the parents meeting?
Say that one more time.
Yeah, I was asking, like, for your son's school, how often is the parents meeting?
It's as often as you want it. So usually it's quarterly, but they keep, since quarantine, is like weekly meetings. If the parents, it's available. There's a time slot every week to see if there's anything that happened during the virtual learning of the week that you felt needed improvement, or if your child feels there's not enough homework or too much homework. So there's weekly opportunities for teachers and parents to meet. I usually meet bi-weekly, just because they're doing such a great job at his school that I really don't have any complaints. So yeah.
Yeah, here we just like, we didn't have any parent meeting. If you were asked to go to the school on a one-on-one basis, it's mostly because your children are making troubles.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tina, what is the name of your school? It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's Boston Conservatory Lab School. It's a music school. All students must graduate learning playing an instrument. So my son plays the clarinet, and it has a connection to Berkeley music college. Berkeley School, yeah. So most of the students who leave this school will eventually go to Berkeley Music School, Berkeley College. So yeah. So
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So music is very much implemented in all the arts. I mean, all of the courses in some capacity. Like they try to tie it back to the instrument in some ways. So it's really fun. I like his school. It's a charter school. It was a lottery. I think, God and my ancestors that we got in, but it's been hard. So
that sounds awesome. That sounds so cool. Man, I try to inject music in everything that I do. Obviously, like I'm in my little my little studio, and even in the work that I do with the kids, always about music or art or something, and I love it so much.
Is that the guitar behind you? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, they're all my guitars, actually.
Wow.
That's pretty dope.
This one, the white one, is when my wife and I got married. Instead of signing like a little guest book, they signed that, like all of our guests signed the guitar. So like we had a Sharpie.
Nice.
And they signed the guitar, so it's a nice little reminder of all the love that we have around our family, and everything else are my guitars that I play.
Wow, we also have a guitar here at home. Cool. I lent it for a little bit during my college years, and I was hoping that my son could pick it up. I mean, he learned also a little bit during the summer vacation, but he just didn't have time for it during the academic year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So one question that I've been thinking really hard is like how to really balance the happy schooling with the academic rigor. I mean, in China, apart from the public school system, there is a tendency of bilingual schools, or what we call international schools. Like back to 2010, there were over 300 bilingual schools here in China, but the number more than doubled in the past decade. So the reasons behind it could be the rise of middle-class families, the dissatisfaction with the public school. More and more families plan to send their kids to study overseas, right? So those bilingual schools are advocating the happy schooling instead of just focusing on the test or academic rigor. But sometimes parents are concerned about if they could really offer the kind of academic rigor or excellence compared to the top public school. So I see it's kind of can't be coexisting. I know it's a big question.
I didn't hear, like, repeat the question. Was it for me?
Yeah, so I was asking about the balance of happy schooling and academic rigor. So I talked about the bilingual schools, which focus on happy schooling, but some parents are concerned if they can offer the academic rigor as the public schools do.
So I'm gonna put something in the chat. After the reading, these are 5 words that I'm gonna tape to my computer as I'm doing my planning, as my lessons. It's gonna help to guide me. I think that'll help me address the happiness and, more important, like the well-being of the kids. So mastery, autonomy, competence, relatedness, well-being. So like if I can use those principles as I do my planning, my initiatives, anything that I do, I think it'll be with the ultimate goal of addressing the well-being of my students and even families. You know, that's one step, I guess, for me. So that's going to be like my totem going forward.
Yeah.
It's nice to have this conversation with you all. Unfortunately, I have a meeting coming next, so I may have to end the conversation here. But if you want to like chat, you can always like Slack each other, I guess, like maybe in a convenient way. And I hope that we can definitely continue this discussion on our like Tuesday classes and Monday classes. I feel like I really like the week's reading. I think they're very powerful ideas that both like useful for students and for teachers. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to have like a verbal discussion.
Thank you so much, Jiabi, for arranging all this.
Yeah. Did you have any last minute thoughts? Kind of.
What?
You were in, I said, do you have any last minute thoughts? I don't know if you were taking over the floor.
I don't know. I think Francisco did a really good summary of the key ideas in the readings. And for me, I guess, I don't know. I feel like he's pretty exhaustive in terms of like the things the takeaway from the readings.
Okay.
I just want to say, like, I feel like it's definitely important for growth mindset. I think it's just like a very powerful idea, especially for students who may not have who are not like I would say like who didn't adapt to the traditional schools very well. And I feel like it's very important for them to realize that there are other ways of learning. If the traditional schools, like if you didn't do well in the traditional schools, it's not necessarily that you're not good at learning. It's just like you may need, there may be other ways that you have to design your learning experiences. And I feel like a lot of students just end up thinking that they're not good at learning. And I just feel that's really sad. And I don't want that to be the reason that they stop reading after they stop learning after they finish the college entrance exam in China. So that's like the biggest thing that I want to like work on. Actually, my final project is kind of like working on this. So I'm really excited to turn what we learn into like a real product that may be helpful to more students.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great, guys. Thank you for sharing and having this conversation. It's been great.
Yes.
We'll just set the time at like 9 to 10 every week, because like looks like the first weeks both like the time works for most people. So I'm just gonna set the time so people don't have to fill out the survey, like the survey for time again.
Yeah,
great.
what a wonderful way to start a Sunday, Sunday morning.
Absolutely. I'm about to do my yoga.
So you have like weekend. It's already evening here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
What a good way to end.
You have another 12 hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
happy weekend.
You too, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good weekend.